Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about human rights and government policy. Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Okay, in this next segment, we're with the WHO and Dr. Tedros and his team with the World Health Organization is going to make comments about what's going on globally with COVID-19. For the second week in a row, there have been a global decline in cases and deaths from COVID-19. There's a huge disconnect growing where some countries with the highest vaccination rates, appear to be in the mindset that the pandemic is over, while others are experiencing huge waves of infection. The pandemic is a long way from being over, according to Dr. Tedros. The WHO has been responding to a surge of cases in India and other hotspots. Demand is currently so high that the WHO needs immediate funding in order to sustain technical and operational supports to all countries, especially for the most affected involved in the present wave. Dr. Tedros wants to reiterate the statement that was released by UNICEF overnight, which outlines a huge shortfall in vaccine supply to COVAX. The surge in cases has compromised the global vaccine supply, and there is already a shortfall of 190 million doses to COVAX by the end of June. So let's listen to what Dr. Tedros has to say in his opening statements, and of course the question and answer session from Dr. Mike Ryan and Dr. Marie Van Kerkhoff. So here we go.
Hello and good day to wherever you're listening to us today. It's Monday, 17 May 2021. My name is Christian Lindmeier, and I'm welcoming you to today's Global 19 press conference with a special focus on the 6th UN Global Road Safety Week, which is 17 to 23 May. We have a very special guest today, and that's Ms. Soleka Mandela, the South African writer and activist and road safety advocate. Simultaneous translation is again provided in the 6 official languages: Arabic, Chinese, French, English, Spanish, and Russian, as well as in Portuguese and Hindi. Now, let me introduce the participants here in the room today. We have, of course, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, WHO Director General. We have Dr. Mike Ryan, Executive Director for WHO's Health Emergencies Program. We have Dr. Maria Van Kerkhoff, Technical Lead on COVID-19. Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Chief Scientist. Dr. Bruce Aylward, Special Advisor to the Director General and the Lead on ACT Accelerator. Dr. Rogerio Gaspar, Director for Regulation and Pre-Qualification. Dr. Etienne Krug, Director for Social Determinants of Health. And we have Dr. Kate O'Brien, Director for Immunization, Vaccines and Biologicals. Hello and welcome to you all. Now, again, apologies for late start of our briefing today, and therefore, with no further ado, Dr. Tedros, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christian. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. For the second week in a row, there has been a global decline in cases and deaths from COVID-19. There is a huge disconnect growing where in some countries with the highest vaccination rates, there appears to be a mindset that the pandemic is over, while others are experiencing huge waves of infection. The situation in a number of countries continues to be very concerning. The pandemic is a long way far from over, and it will not be over anywhere until it's over everywhere. Even some places that have previously done very well at containing COVID-19 are seeing dramatic increases in cases, hospitalizations, and deaths. New variants of concern, fragile health systems, reduced implementation of public health measures, and supply shortages of oxygen, dexamethasone, and vaccines are all compounding the current situation. But there are solutions to these problems. Where cases are rising, now is the moment to ensure people are adhering to public health measures, including physical distancing, the wearing of masks, and preventing large gatherings. Even where cases have dropped, genetic sequencing is critical so that variants can be tracked and measures are not eased prematurely. WHO has been responding to the surge in cases in India and other hotspots. However, demand is currently so high that WHO needs immediate funding in order to sustain its technical and operational support to all countries, especially the most affected, involved in the present wave. In 2020, donors very generously contributed to the Strategic Preparedness and Response Plan. However, in 2021, the current response plan is underfunded, and the vast majority of that is ring-fenced by donors for specific countries or activities. This is constraining WHO's ability to provide an adaptable and scalable response in emerging hotspots. WHO requires urgent funding to the current response plan, which would allow us to scale up support for countries and support the ACT accelerator. Flexibility of that finance is key, not just so that we can respond quickly to the emergency needs in several countries, including Nepal, but that we can work to save lives and livelihoods where it's most needed in a rapidly evolving situation. On vaccine supply, I want to reiterate the statement that was released by UNICEF overnight, which outlines the huge shortfall in vaccine supply to COVAX. The surge in cases has compromised global vaccine supply, and there is already a shortfall of 190 million doses to COVAX by the end of June. COVAX works and has so far delivered 65 million doses to 124 countries and economies, but it is dependent on countries and manufacturers honoring their commitment. While we appreciate the work of AstraZeneca, who have been steadily increasing the speed and volume of their deliveries, we need other manufacturers to follow suit. Pfizer has committed to providing 40 million doses of vaccines with COVAX this year, but the majority of this would be in the second half of 2021. We need doses right now and call on them to bring forward deliveries as soon as possible. COVAX partners are in discussion with Johnson & Johnson to receive doses in the second half of 2021. But this has not been finalized, and we do not know when they will arrive. Moderna has signed a deal for 500 million doses with COVAX, but the majority has been promised only for 2022. We need Moderna to bring hundreds of millions of this forward into 2021 due to the acute moment of this pandemic. Once the devastating outbreak in India recedes, we also need the Serum Institute of India to get back on track and catch up on its delivery commitments to COVAX. Furthermore, we need high-income countries that have contracted much of the immediate global supply of vaccines to share them now. I call on manufacturers to publicly commit to helping any country that wants to share their vaccines with COVAX to lift contractual barriers within days, not months. We also need manufacturers to give the right of first refusal to COVAX on any additional dose capacity. And we need the large vaccine manufacturers to enter into their deals with companies like Teva, Incepta, BioLize, and others who are willing to use their facilities to produce COVID-19 vaccines. Only by working through COVAX can we quickly get vaccines to those health workers that have been on the front lines of this pandemic for more than a year. We need to collectively set ambitious goals to at least vaccinate the world's adult population as quickly as possible. No one is safe until we are all safe. Due to lockdowns and people working from home, mobility decreased in the pandemic. This has led to fewer road crashes overall. However, because people often drive at higher speeds when there is less traffic, the number of deaths did not decrease due to the same degree. When speeds are lowered, the risk of death and injury reduces exponentially. This week marks UN Global Road Safety Week, and we are seeking to garner policy commitments at national and local levels to deliver 30 km/h speed limits in urban areas and generate local support for low speed measures overall. Today, I'm pleased to be joined by Zoleka Mandela, who is the Global Ambassador for the Child Health Initiative, to outline the effort to ensure every child has a healthy journey to school. Zoleka, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank Dr. Tedros and the WHO for hosting and including the important issue of road safety in today's briefing. As Dr. Tedros has said, this is an issue of high relevance for COVID-19. Throughout the pandemic, as cities around the world have locked down, as the traffic dropped, we've seen a different reality where road traffic injury had been briefly lowered, where our air was made cleaner and our communities, in some ways, became more livable. Now, of course, we need our cities to be fully functioning again, but what our campaigning has been focused on is how we can take some of these temporary benefits and make them more permanent. Our call to action launched today is for low-speed streets in every community all around the world. I lost my daughter, Zenani Mandela, to road traffic injury. She was killed on a Johannesburg road and had just celebrated her 13th birthday. I have never recovered from this, and my family has never recovered from this. No family ever does. Today and every day, 3,000 children and young people are killed or injured on the world's roads. This is a crisis which is man-made and one that is entirely preventable. What we need is a big shift. We need 30 km/h streets where children, the old, and the vulnerable mix with traffic. We need this in every single community and in every neighborhood around the world. This week, we're pushing for 30 km/h commitments. Governments have been stepping forward. Spain has committed to 30 km/h in its cities. The whole of the Brussels city region has been going 30. And there's work for low-speed streets all around the world, from Bogota and Mexico City to Lusaka, Kigali, Ho Chi Minh City, and others. But we need more. This is a global agenda, and it is critical for climate and the Sustainable Development Goals. On my continent, the majority of children walk to school. The poor in particular have to get by on foot. Yet most roads in Africa, especially where vehicles are traveling at higher speeds, don't even have a safe footpath. What makes it worse is that we actually need more walking and cycling if we're going to fight climate change. But there's nowhere near enough investment in this, even when we've seen the benefits during COVID-19. So this is urgent, not only for the climate, but it's also urgent for our health, and actually urgent for our rights and the rights of our children. My grandparents knew quite a bit about fairness and human rights, and today I'm striving to keep their legacy alive. The poor and the vulnerable are forced to breathe toxic air and to have their children face speeding traffic every single day. Basic life-saving measures need to be put in place. Is it really too much to ask? So I call on all leaders at all levels to please join the call to action launched today. With partners around the world and at the Child Health Initiative, we will be taking this campaign forward in a new advocacy hub, which has 30 km/h streets as a key demand. As we respond to and recover from COVID-19, please make our streets more livable. Help people get to work and to school safely. Help them lead healthier, more productive lives. Our streets are for the people. Our streets are for our planet. Our streets are for life. Thank you.
Thank you, Zeleka. Thank you for sharing your reflections on the need for action to reduce traffic speed and improve road safety. Thank you so much for your leadership. Together, we're building momentum towards the launch of the global plan for the decade of action for road safety 2021-2030. We have made great progress, but with your support and partners around the world, we can do a lot more. Zoleka, thank you so much again. Over the weekend, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory and Israel could potentially unleash an uncontainable security and humanitarian crisis. The health situation is also highly concerning, and in the recent escalation of conflict, dozens of incidents involving health workers and health facilities have occurred. Furthermore, COVID-19 testing and vaccination has been severely impacted. This creates health risks for the world as a whole. Protection of health workers and health facilities is an imperative in all circumstances. It's essential that the norms of international humanitarian law be fully respected. In particular, health workers and infrastructure should always be protected, and I call for leaders on all sides to ensure respect for these vital humanitarian laws.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. And welcome back, everyone. This next segment is from Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, making a virtual announcement that the federal government is committing $10 million to recruit and train up to 2,000 energy auditors as it launches the Canada Greener Homes Grant in the coming weeks. Up to $5,000 will be provided in grants to help retrofit 700,000 homes. The Prime Minister has joined the Natural Resource Minister, Seamus O'Regan, and Employment Minister Carla Quattro Following the announcement, the ministers O'Regan and Quattro will respond to questions from other reporters concerning Major General Danny Fortin's departure as head of Canada's vaccine rollout amid military investigation into sexual misconduct allegations. The sexual misconduct investigation was announced late last week, and from there, the Major General was pulled from his service of trafficking and bringing in vaccine into Canada, and is an interesting move to see how this actually works out, because it was key in overlooking to making sure that the vaccines were coming into the country and in making sure that they were getting to where they needed to get to within the provinces. And now somebody else has to actually step up and take that role and ensure that the job gets done in a timely manner, the same as Major General Danny Fortin was actually doing. So we'll have to keep an eye on that also with the trafficking of vaccines for different province vaccination programs. So let's listen to what Prime Minister Trudeau and the ministers actually have to say in this press conference.
Consulting Energy Advisors, and to Corey Diamond from Efficiency Canada for joining us today. In the coming weeks, we'll be launching a new program, the Greener Homes Grant, to help retrofit up to 700,000 homes. This investment will provide energy audits as well as grants of up to $5,000 for homeowners so that they can make energy efficient improvements. If you're a homeowner, this will make your life more affordable and lower your energy bills, all while fighting climate change and creating good middle-class jobs. To make these renovations happen, we need workers who can install windows, heating and cooling experts, electricians, and insulation specialists. But before any of that work gets going on your house, you need an energy advisor who can tell you where you're losing heat in the winter or why your house is getting too hot in the summer, so you can plan what makes the most sense to invest in. We know that there's going to be a bigger demand for energy advisors now and in the coming years as more and more people retrofit their homes. And we have to make sure homeowners have access to energy evaluations everywhere in Canada. Today, we're announcing a $10 million commitment to recruit, train, and mentor up to 2,000 new energy advisors right across the country. Whether for people who already work in construction or in a whole range of other fields, this training program will open up new opportunities for people across the country. These are good, well-paying jobs. Everyone should have a chance to benefit from this great career choice. That's why we will actively recruit people from all walks of life to join the growing energy efficiency sector. Par le biais de l'initiative Maison plus écologique, on va investir 10 millions de dollars pour créer 2000 bons emplois de conseillers en efficacité énergétique partout au pays. Ces nouveaux conseillers vont faire en sorte que les propriétaires de maisons, peu importe où ils vivent, auront un meilleur accès à des conseils ciblés et à des évaluations énerguides. Bien sûr, cette initiative va aussi aider à créer d'autres bons emplois pour la classe moyenne en encourageant le secteur de l'efficacité énergétique et de la construction, en plus d'avoir des effets positifs tout au long de nos chaînes d'approvisionnement. Ministers O'Regan and Qualtrough will have more details to share in just a few moments, but the bottom line is this. Creating green jobs is not only good for the economy, for workers, and for the environment. It makes life more affordable for the middle class, too. After all, anyone with a home knows that leaky windows or an old furnace don't just waste power, they waste money, too. By putting those retrofits in reach for homeowners, we're going to help people cut their energy bills while also cutting extra emissions. Les bâtiments au Canada, incluant nos maisons, comptent pour 18% de nos émissions de gaz à effet de serre. C'est pourquoi il est important de travailler à rendre nos maisons plus éco-énergétiques. En plus de rendre nos chez-soi plus confortables et leur entretien plus abordable, ces mesures vont nous aider à atteindre notre objectif de carboneutralité d'ici 2050. Climate change is real, and it's an existential threat. That's why we're continuing to strengthen our climate plan with smart, targeted investments. We have a plan to rebuild a more resilient economy and a more sustainable future for all Canadians. Because that's what Building Back Better is all about. Real solutions that work for real people. A healthier future, good jobs, and a stronger, cleaner economy. That's what we're going to keep delivering for Canadians. Thank you. Je suis maintenant heureux de céder la parole à Cindy Garot.
And this means over 55% of eligible adults 18 years and over have now received their first dose of vaccine in British Columbia. We've also given 130,023 second doses, which is about 3%, but we know that many people will be coming due in the next few weeks with their dose too. Everyone in BC now who is 18 years of age or older can register and book your appointment. It is now your turn, all of our turn, and I encourage everyone to get immunized as soon as you can. The data we shared last week reminds us that it takes as long as 3 weeks or longer to have the full protection from these vaccine doses. So the sooner you register and book your appointment and get your vaccine, the sooner you will have the protection that we are all looking for from this dose. Later on this week, I anticipate we'll be able to share more details about vaccine availability for youth, 12 to 17 as well. I do want to take a minute to talk about the second dose for people who in British Columbia who've received the AstraZeneca vaccine since we had our first shipment in about mid-March. We know that this vaccine, from the clinical trials and from the evidence that we've seen in other places, including the UK and here, that the protection that you get after dose 1 with this vaccine goes up over a period of as long as 12 weeks. And we know that even a delay for up to 12 weeks means that you get better protection from the vaccine, and that is the way that our immune system develops both our antibody protection and the cell-mediated protection over time. The remaining stock that we have of AstraZeneca here in BC, and we have kept somewhere in the vicinity of about 20,000 doses, is good until the end of June. So it does not expire. We know that there's been reports, and some of the lots that were received in Canada and some other provinces expires at the end of May. We have used up all of the AstraZeneca that we received that expired early on in May, and we now have vaccine ready and waiting for people for their dose 2, that we have some time before you're due for that, and we know that your immune system is well primed, and time because the vaccine is, the expiry date is not until the end of June. So for all of those who have received their first dose, you will have the option of receiving your second dose of AstraZeneca. And I know that's very important for many people. They chose to receive AstraZeneca because of the way the vaccine is produced and the effectiveness that we've seen from this important vaccine in other places. But we will have more information as well in the next few weeks to give everybody all of the information they need to make an informed choice about what you wish to receive for your second dose if you received AstraZeneca. And I say in the next 2 weeks, by the first week of June, we expect to have all of the results in from the immunogenicity studies that were done in the UK and other places to understand if there is the same or better protection from receiving the AstraZeneca first and then a Pfizer vaccine second. So I ask people to be patient. We know that we have some time as your immune system is developing its protective response to your first dose. You will have the options of receiving the second dose of AstraZeneca, and we have stocks coming in to be able to support that. Or you can take the information once we have it and make your own decision about what you want for your second dose. So I just want to reassure people that we have not forgotten, and we will be providing the information as soon as we get it to help you make those decisions. I know as well that for many people this May long weekend is often the unofficial kickoff to summer. And I know that we are all looking forward to this summer being different. But we are not yet ready to make any changes to our current provincial health orders this week. This means this long weekend it is important for all of us to stay the course. That means staying local, staying small, and remembering to use all of our protective measures, even as more and more of us are immunized and we pass that critical period of time that our immune system is ramping up to protect us. As well, we now have 400 to 500 people a day that are still testing positive for COVID-19. And that reminds us that the virus continues to circulate. And we have to do all we can to stop those transmissions as we're all developing this protection. That's why we can't be making any changes right now. We can't be traveling, and we can't be having large gatherings this weekend. But after this, we will be able to move on and move ahead. And we will be reviewing the number of people vaccinated, the peak at 3-week effectiveness, as well as the level of community transmission over the next few days to determine where we can go from here. And there is a plan that we will be presenting to you. Until then, we all need to hold the line. What you do today determines where we will all be 2 to 3 weeks from now. And that's why everything that we're doing right now is going to make a difference for our summer. I don't think anybody wants to see a surge in cases in 2 weeks. That would just set us back again, and we don't need to do that. We need to keep moving forward. We know that now over 55% of people 18 and over in this province are immunized, and their protection levels are going up as more and more of us are getting started on that path. So we need to continue to hold the line right now and continue to support each other to get through these next few weeks, to be kind to each other, to be calm, and to stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back, everyone. And John Horgan is making an announcement about tourism and valuable attractions to BC. BC in of itself is a beautiful place for people to come visit. Has lots of attractions, botanical gardens, mountains, trails, beaches, all sorts of things that you can think of that make our planet wonderful and beautiful, and so much of that is contained right here in BC. And with travel restrictions and border crossings not being allowed, and restrictions to public events not being allowed to happen, tourism in British Columbia has really taken a hard hit. The restaurant industry, hotels, all of it has taken a major hit. And John Horgan is, with his announcement, he is going to, for those who are eligible, they can receive up to $1 million. major anchor attractions in rural areas that receive 15,000 or more visitors per year are eligible for up to $500,000. Tour bus companies that serve 30,000 or more passengers per year are eligible, again, up to that same $500,000. So a lot of these places are not big business places. They are small businesses, and it would seem that Mr. Horgan is getting that out of the tourism industry. This would be a big boost to help keep the things like the botanical gardens and the attractions updated and maintained, and hopefully this summer a lot of things will be able to open up, and we'll have things like the P&E and other things happen so that we can start to get our province back on track. So let's listen to all the details that John Horgan presents in this major anchor attractions support for BC tourism.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. John Horgan here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. And I'm joined here today by Minister Melanie Mark and Jonathan Burke, the board chair of the H.R. McMillan Space Centre. As we all know, the days are getting warmer and a little bit longer, and over 55% of eligible British Columbians have received their first vaccine. Now, while we still need to bear down against the pandemic, all signs are pointing to positive days ahead this coming summer. We have challenges to be sure, but we need to focus for the next number of days on following rules, making sure we're not traveling unnecessarily, and hoping for a better future coming after the May long weekend. Everybody in BC, of course, has fond memories of visiting and working at BC's major tourism attractions. From museums to amusement parks to science centres, these sites are part of BC's world-renowned tourism industry. And right now, people in tourism are hurting. In fact, few sectors have been hit as hard by COVID-19 as the tourism sector. Many of our major tourism attractions, as we all know and love, are struggling, and we need to make sure we're there for them. The effects, of course, are far-reaching, not just on those anchor attractions, but to the many communities that depend on tourism landmarks to have people coming through their community to boost the local economy and bring visitors to town. They provide many young people with their first jobs. I worked on the Coho Ferry, a tourism operation from Port Angeles to Victoria when I was in high school, telling people how to get to Butchart Gardens when they came off the ferry. And I'm not alone. Many other British Columbians had the same experience, their first job, and also an introduction to how important it is to welcome back visitors to our province. But not just yet. It's not far off, but we need to stay vigilant and we need to be mindful that our international borders remain closed and there are public health orders in place to restrict non-essential travel. It's critically important to our well-being that we do so. But we also need to now start to focus on what we do coming out of the pandemic and how can we help businesses not just survive, but to recover strongly as we come out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Today, we're launching a new program to support BC's tourism landmarks. The new BC Major Anchor Attractions Program will provide a total of up to $50 million to sites right across British Columbia. And that will include, of course, tour bus operators who will be eligible because they bring people to many of these attractions, day after day, month after month, year after year. This is, of course, a grant, not a loan, and that means it can be used for a number of things to offset fixed costs like payroll, rent, utilities, and other costs that have been accrued over the past number of months. All of this with the goal of making it easier to restart and ramp up operations when it's safe to do so. There's more to do to support tourism, to be sure, but this is a critically important first step. It helps us to fill the gaps that were identified by the Tourism Task Force, which was put together at the request of the industry. Overall, it supports midterm recovery and long-term resilience for the tourism industry. We all want to enjoy the iconic attractions that make British Columbia so special. And I'm going to ask Minister Melanie Mark now to share some of those details with you as we prepare to welcome the world back to British Columbia again when it's safe to do so. Over to you, Mel.
Thank you, Premier. Simgaget, Sigidamanak, Gibit Wiltsik. Hi, everyone. My name is Melanie Mark. My Niska name is Lahaikwaskak, and I'm very proud to be BC's Minister for Tourism, Arts, Culture, and Sport. I'm also the first and only First Nations woman to get elected in BC and to serve in BC's cabinet. I'm proud to be Niska, Gitsan, Cree, and Ojibwe, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations whose territory we're coming to you from. Thank you for joining us from all parts of the province to hear about further supports for the tourism sector. As the Premier said, the COVID-19 pandemic has had devastating and long-term impacts on tourism businesses. From small businesses trying to stay open safely and keep people working to rent payments and cash flow for large organizations, we know the hardships people in the tourism industry continue to face. Throughout the pandemic, our government has worked with tourism leaders to listen to their feedback and provide additional supports. Major anchor attractions and tour bus companies have faced unique challenges across our tourism ecosystem. They play a vital role in our economy. They are key employers in local communities. Businesses across the province rely on anchor attractions to draw visitors to communities, to visit the gift shops, the restaurants, and other attractions in the area. Tour bus companies are vital to make these regional destinations and experiences accessible for travelers. Today's announcement means we're taking action to ensure these important institutions can continue to create jobs, contribute to local culture, and draw people back to BC once it's safe to do so. Many major attractions, anchor attractions, and tour bus operators continue to face significant liquidity challenges. The loss of these organizations would undermine the tourism industry's short-term recovery prospects and significantly impact jobs in the tourism sector. There is up to $50 million in supports, as the Premier mentioned, through the BC Major Anchor Attractions Program. Major anchor attractions in urban centres that receive 75,000 or more visitors per year are eligible up to $1 million. Major anchor attractions in rural areas that receive 15,000 or more visitors per year, and tour bus companies that serve 30,000 or more passengers per year are both eligible for up to 500,000. Supporting anchor attractions and tour bus companies will help maintain vitally important tourism infrastructure. It also has a strong ripple effect, as the Premier mentioned, on our youth. Many tourism attractions provide invaluable work experience, job, and life skills training for young people, and in some cases help students pay for their post-secondary education. The bottom line is, people are our economy, and when people are working, our economy works. Starting today, the province will be accepting applications from anchor attractions and tour bus companies throughout BC. As the Premier said, these are grants, not loans. It's a very, very exciting day for the industry. The application window will be open until Monday, June 7th, with funds provided by July 2021. I strongly encourage organizations to apply because we want these supports to help major anchor attractions and tour bus companies weather the impacts of COVID-19 now, so that BC remains a globally competitive destination of choice in the long term when we safely invite visitors back to our beautiful province. With almost 60% of eligible British Columbians vaccinated, there is reason to be hopeful. Together, we are going to make progress. And on that note, I would like to introduce Jonathan Burke, Board Chair of the H.R. Macmillan Space Centre in Vancouver. He will share the experiences those in the tourism sector face today and how these supports will help. Thank you. Over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Minister Mark and Premier Horgan. I'm very happy to be part of this announcement. It's very exciting for our organization. To give you some context of what happened to the Space Centre due to COVID, we employ approximately 50 people here in Vancouver at the Space Center. We had to lay off over half of our employees at the beginning of COVID-19. We've been slowly drawing people back through wage supports and other programs. And our board and our management team immediately focused on three priorities. First, survive as an organization. Second, working on resetting our organization. We went to a lot of online program. We tried to develop whatever programming we could that could get out to an audience that didn't involve on-site visits. But to give you some context of what happened to our on-site attendance, in 2019 we had almost 143,000 people move through the gates at the H.R. MacMillan Space Center. That went to 33,000 in 2020. Almost a 76% decline. So you can imagine what happened to our revenues. We went from almost 1.2 million in revenues to 270,000 in revenues from gate admissions, a 78% decline in revenue, which was very dramatic, and it was very, very difficult to deal with what happened. In addition, we also provide a lot of educational programs at the H.R. MacMillan Space Center to school-age children, and our 2020 attendance declined almost 80% for school-age children visiting our site. So it was a dramatic impact. We're now focusing on getting ready for when the pandemic is what we might call over, and that is part of our survive, reset, and now thrive. And these funds from the government will really contribute towards our ability to thrive as an organization as we emerge from the pandemic, to prepare for guests to come back, for all of the associated activities that happen on our beautiful location. And this is just a wonderful day and a wonderful announcement, and I thank you.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Next up is the media update from the Pan American Health Organization, or PAHO. The director of PAHO, Carissa Etienne, is going to point out that only 3% of Latin Americans and Caribbeans have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. Dr. Etienne has asserted that the shortage of vaccines is a synonym for our region's overdependence on imports for essential medical supplies, and less than 4% of the medical products during the COVID response have come to the region. She also will assert that it should be possible for Latin America and the Caribbeans to be able to manufacture vaccines and be provided with some of the materials needed to do so in order to keep Latin America and the Caribbean islands safe from the pandemic and put an end to the continuing infections from COVID-19. So let's actually listen to Dr. Etienne and her team from PAHO.
Last week, there were over 1.2 million new COVID cases and 31,000 deaths reported in the Americas. We've seen COVID infections drop throughout the region in the last month, offering some reprieve to our beleaguered health systems. But 3 out of the 5 countries in the world with the highest numbers of new infections are in the Americas. And many Caribbean islands like the Bahamas, Haiti, and Trinidad and Tobago are seeing COVID deaths double in the last week. Canada has registered a tripling of cases in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and its Northwest Territories as hospitalizations across the country are on the rise. Costa Rica, Panama, and parts of Honduras are reporting sharp rises in new infections. Infections are also on the rise in Bolivia and French Guiana. In Brazil, we see a pause in the decreasing trends that were observed during the previous weeks. And despite overall reductions in most South American countries, some hotspots in Argentina and Uruguay saw a doubling of cases and deaths in the last week. ICU occupancy rates remain at 90% in many areas of Brazil and Colombia, a sign that these communities are still at a high risk of not getting the care that they need. But the most dramatic change has been in the US, where today almost half of Americans have received at least one COVID vaccine dose, and nearly 85% of those over the age of 85 are fully protected. This widespread coverage has led to a sharp reduction in US COVID infections, deaths, and hospitalizations. The progress that we're seeing in the US is a testament to the power of safe and effective COVID vaccines, but it underscores the vital importance of accelerating access to vaccines throughout our region so that other countries can fully immunize their own populations. With the help of COVAX, PAHO has delivered more than 12 million COVID vaccine doses to the Americas, with another 770,000 doses en route to countries in Central America and the Caribbean. Over 400 million COVID doses have been administered in our region, although the lion's share of those have been in the US. Indeed, just 3% of Latin Americans have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19. And we still have a long way to go to ensure that everyone is protected. We urgently need more vaccines for Latin America and the Caribbean, a region that has been put to the test severely by this pandemic. The glaring gaps in access to COVID vaccines throughout Latin America and the Caribbean are a symptom of our region's overdependence on imports for essential medical supplies. Less than 4% of medical products in use during the COVID response have come from the region. That means more than 90% have been sourced out of the region. And thanks to export bans, supply chain delays, and lack of purchasing power, our region has struggled to compete for access to personal protective equipment, to oxygen supplies, medicines, and vaccines, which are all vital to the COVID response as our people suffer the consequences. So expanding our regional capacity to manufacture strategic medical supplies, especially vaccines, is a must, both for our people and as a matter of health security. Luckily, we have some of the building blocks to make it happen. Strong academic and research institutions, existing manufacturing capacity, robust regulatory systems, and an effective mechanism of procurement. Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Cuba have well-established vaccine manufacturing plants that have helped immunize generations of Latin Americans. Some of these plants are being updated to produce COVID vaccines thanks to technology transfer agreements with manufacturers like AstraZeneca. But meeting our region's needs will require expanding production capacity well beyond what's already planned. We must ramp up production for the entire vaccine value chain, from the ingredients that go into vaccines to the vials and syringes that help us deliver them, without compromising quality. We have 8 national regulatory authorities throughout our region that do have the capacity to oversee this work. This sets our region apart. But we must also look to the future and embrace the promise of mRNA technologies, which, although novel and more expensive, present possibilities beyond COVID vaccines. PAHO is working closely with WHO on its COVID-19 mRNA vaccine technology transfer hub. And we are in discussion with regional partners like the Inter-American Development Bank, the Organization of American States, and our member states to ensure countries interested in expanding their manufacturing capacity have the resources and the support that they need to make it happen. And we're pleased to see countries like Chile, Argentina, Peru, and others already showing interest. We must also lean on our legacy of regional cooperation because it is impractical to think that any one country could manufacture vaccines from start to finish just to meet the needs of its own population. The cost is simply too high, and sustainability would be at risk. And that's why we're engaging with regional organizations, sub-regional integration mechanisms, and others on policy and regulatory issues, research and development, and the investments we need for a coherent regional system that can make increased capacity a reality in the Americas. For this work, and for this to work, we need scale, a commitment to purchase regional-made products, and assurance that products will flow freely and without export bans, even during emergencies. Our revolving fund stands ready to help purchase and deliver these products throughout our region, as we have done for the last 40 years. A regional manufacturing network that builds on our national strengths and that is backed by sustained financial commitments is long overdue. It's also our best hope for a long-term solution because COVID will not be the last virus that tests our health system. And while these investments are urgently needed to support our COVID response, we do know that they will take time. PAHO is committed to coordinating with our member countries and partners to advance a vision of greater self-sufficiency in vaccines and medical products manufacturing in the Americas. But until then, let's remember that this pandemic is not over, and there is still much to do to prevent more cases and save lives. I beg you, do your part.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Three, two. Welcome back, everyone. And President Joe Biden, Vice President Harris, they are about to sit down and sign a bill that will get tough on hate crimes. So many of us have suffered from hate. We, many of us have grown up hearing how we were substandard or just not able to achieve as much, or just our abilities wouldn't be what they should be to complete certain jobs, certain tasks, because of the color of our skin, where our families may have originated from, whatever part of the world that we may have been, or when something went wrong, such as this pandemic, where we had Asian people attacked because it was their fault that the virus and the pandemic actually happened. They brought it to our country. They brought it to our continent. We all should be learning this one simple lesson, and I think that this is what President Biden and Vice President Harris really want to get across, that hate is not just wrong, it just isn't needed or wanted, and we need to take the right actions to get it out of our society. Let's listen to what President Biden and Vice President Harris have to say.
Name a couple of whom I will. Among them, Senator Tammy Duckworth, Senator Richard Blumenthal, Senator Jerry Moran, Congresswoman Judy Chu, Congressman Don Beyer, and Congressman Fred Upton. Because of you, history will remember this day and this moment when our nation took action to combat hate. Thank you all. Around this time last year, when I was in the Senate, Senator Hirono and Senator Duckworth and I introduced a resolution in the United States Senate condemning the rise of anti-Asian sentiment in our country. At that time, more than 1,100 anti-Asian hate incidents had been reported since the start of the pandemic. Today, that number is more than 6,600. And I'm talking about incidents where businesses are being vandalized in our biggest cities and in our smallest towns. I'm talking about a 61-year-old man getting kicked in the head, 2 elderly women being stabbed while waiting for the bus, 8 people in Atlanta getting shot on a Tuesday night. This violence, it did not come from nowhere, and none of it is new. In my life, my lived experience, I have seen how hate can pervade our communities. I have served in the justice system, in the legislative branch, and in the executive branch. I have seen how hate can impede our progress. And I have seen how people uniting against hate can strengthen our country. Those here today are united. This bill brings us one step closer to stopping hate, not only for Asian Americans, but for all Americans. It will expedite the Justice Department's review of hate crimes, every type of hate crime. It will designate an official at the department to oversee the effort, and it will expand efforts to make the reporting of hate crimes more accessible at the local and state levels. But after the President signs this bill today, our work will not be done. Here's the truth. Racism exists in America. Xenophobia exists in America. Anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, homophobia, transphobia, it all exists. And so the work to address injustice, wherever it exists, remains the work ahead. My fellow Americans, it is my great honor to mention and to say to you what you already know. We have a President of the United States in one Joe Biden who is committed to this work. He is determined to, I will quote from him, give hate no safe harbor. And I'll tell you firsthand, I've seen what you know. His actions match his powerful words. It is my great honor to introduce the President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you. Thank you, please. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Susan, progress is possible. We're moving. Good afternoon, everyone. I said from the beginning of my campaign, Madam Speaker, that the campaign for president throughout, and you would call me and tell me, keep it up, was about bringing people together, about uniting the country. We need to unite as one people, one nation, one America. And that was the thing I was most often criticized about, saying, how can you unite the country? We must unite the country. I said it in my kickoff speech in Philadelphia. I said it again when I spoke at Gettysburg. And I emphasized it in my inaugural address. A lot of people, press to elected officials, were somewhat skeptical of that could be done. It's just beginning, but I'm confident we can do this and so much more. And I believe with every fiber in my being that there are simple core values and beliefs that should bring us together as Americans. One of them is standing together against hate, against racism, the ugly poison that has long haunted and plagued our nation. Today, I can say that because of all of you, many of you sitting right in front of me, you've taken that first step. It's an important step. I'd like to thank the Congress and the members who are here today, Democrats and Republicans, who came together to get the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act on my desk. Well, on a desk I'm about to sign on. But I want to thank the Majority Leader Schumer. I want to thank Speaker Pelosi for your leadership. I also want to thank the leader from the state of Kentucky for letting it go forward. It's important. It's important. Most of all, Maisie, or Senator, I called you Maisie. I apologize, Maisie. I call Chuck anyway, yeah. Senator Hirono, Senator Tammy Duckworth, who helped deliver this 94-1 vote. When you get involved, Tammy, you don't screw around. You just 94-1. State Representative Grace Meng and Judy Chu, who helped deliver a 364 to 62 vote in the House of Representatives. That's incredible. I also want to thank, as I said, Republican members in Congress for their leadership, including Senator Moran and Senator Collins. I also want to thank as I said, to all of the folks, all the people here today who are involved, and those of you, whether you're in the Congress or not, supporting this effort. I say thank you, thank you, thank you. We got a lot more to do, but we simply haven't seen this kind of bipartisanship for much too long in Washington. You're showing that our democracy can work and deliver for the American people. Just days after the mass shooting in Atlanta area, the Vice President Harris and I, we went down to Atlanta to meet with Asian Americans and the community across Georgia. It was a raw and emotional visit we had. We heard about their pain, their fear, anger, and all that existed in the community, and the feelings were about those feelings that they felt invisible, not seen. We heard how too many Asian Americans have been waking up each morning this past year genuinely fearing for their safety, just opening the door and walking down the street, and safety for their loved ones. The moms and dads who, when they let their kids out the door to go to school, were worried. Attacked, blamed, scapegoated, harassed during this pandemic. Living in fear for their lives, as I said, just walking down the street. Grandparents afraid to leave their homes, even to get vaccinated, for fear of being attacked. Small business owners targeted and gunned down. Students worried about two things: COVID-19 and being bullied. Documented incidents of hate against Asian Americans has seen a shocking spike, as the Vice President has outlined at the front of her comments, let alone the ones that have never been reported. Gut-wrenching attacks on some of the most vulnerable people in our nation, the elderly, low-wage workers, women, brutally attacked simply by walking outside or waiting for a bus. Asian American women suffer twice as many incidents of harassment and violence as Asian American men. And the conversation we had in Atlanta is one we're hearing all across the country, that all of this hate hides in plain sight. It hides in plain sight. And too often, it is met with silence. Silence by the media, silence by our politics, and silence by our history. For centuries, Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, Pacific Islanders, diverse and vibrant communities have helped build this nation only to be often stepped over, forgotten, or ignored. Lived here for generations, but still considered by some the other. It's wrong. It's simply, to use the phrase, it's simply un-American. My message to all of those of you who are hurting is, we see you. And the Congress has said, we see you. And we are committed to stop the hatred and the bias. In my first week in office, I signed a presidential memorandum directing federal agencies, all of them, to combat the resurgence of xenophobia. Not just one, every agency. Attorney General Garland, Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, Associate Attorney General Gupta are all here today. The Department of Justice is strengthening its partnership with the community to prevent these crimes, in addition to its other work to take on violent extremism and domestic terrorism. And with the new law, this new law, the Department of Justice and our entire administration is going to step up. Right now, this is a critical problem of hate crimes being underreported. It stems from two challenges. First, there's lack of resources and training for state and local law enforcement to accurately identify and report hate crimes to the FBI. Secondly, for more people in communities of color, there are language and cultural barriers in how to communicate what's happening to them. This law is going to make a difference. For example, the Department of Justice will issue clear guidance for state, city, and tribal and law enforcement agencies on how to establish online reporting of hate crimes. It will work with the Department of Health and Human Services to raise public awareness of COVID-19 hate crimes that occurred during the pandemic. It will also be a devoted official at the Department of Justice whose sole job is to expedite the review of hate crime reports. And thanks to two families here today, the law will help state and local governments ensure hate crime information is more accessible to the public. The family of Heather Heyer, a civil rights activist whose life was taken standing up to Nazis marching from the shadows of vengeance in Charlottesville. And the family of Khalid Jabara, a proud son of a family who's immigrated from Lebanon in search of new beginnings, who was gunned down in front of their home here in America, in the United States of America, by a neighbor fueled by hate. Khalid and Heather were murdered on the same day, 1 year apart. Instead of sharing the dreams they had for their children, both families share profound grief. And they've shown incredible courage to turn their pain into purpose. I hope you'll not be offended, but I ask both families to please stand. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for being here, because I know it's hard. No matter how celebratory it is, it's a law is being changed. When you have to show up at something memorializing your family, it's like you got the news 10 seconds ago. It's the hardest thing to do. I know from experience it takes enormous courage. But I hope that every day that's passed, the memory, son and daughter, brings a smile to your lips before it brings a tear to your eye. Because I promise you, a lot of people understand who've gone through similar things. It's hard. So I really mean it when I say thank you. Thank you for being here. It takes a lot of courage. Thank you. Because of you, the amendment named in honor of Khalid and Heather is now law to make sure that hate crimes are more accurately counted and reported, and hopefully leading to a continued focus on ending these crimes. It will provide resources to create specialized hate crimes units. That will also help states create hotlines for hate crimes at state and local levels that will be accessible for people with limited English proficiency. And it provides resources for training for state and local law enforcement to identify, investigate, and report these heinous crimes. But of all the good that the law can do, we have to change our hearts. We have to change the hearts of the American people. Hate can't, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, hate can be given no safe harbor in America. I mean it, no safe harbor. It can't be dismissed like, well, that's just what happens. My sister Valerie and I talk about it all the time. You got to speak up. Speak up and speak out. It's on all of us together, to make it stop. My message is to all of those who think this doesn't matter to them, or this is not a problem, look around. Look in the mirror. Look in the eyes of your children. Every one of us are lessened. Every one of us are lessened. And we're all hurt by this hate. It has a way of seeping sort of through the cracks into communities and children who, in fact, wouldn't have crossed their mind. Words have consequences, as the senator knows. He preaches it. He understands it. Consequences. But silence is complicity. Silence is complicity. And we cannot be complicit. We have to speak out. We have to act. That's what you've done. And I can't thank you enough. I'm proud today. I'm proud today of the United States. I'm proud today of our political system, the United States Congress. I'm proud today that Democrats and Republicans have stood up together to say something. Let me close with this. Grief, as we all know, is universal, but so is hope. So is love. Sounds corny, but it really is. It really is. And hope and love can be contagious. We're the United States of America. We're good and decent people. We're unique among all nations in that we are uniquely a product of a document, not an ethnicity, not a religion, not a geography, of a document. And think about this, I'm being literal. Uniquely a product of a document that says we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Every time we're silent, every time we let hate flourish, we make a lie of who we are as a nation. I mean it literally. We cannot let the very foundation of this country continue to be eaten away like it has been in other moments in our history and happening again. I looked at this law that you all passed as maybe the first break, the first significant break on a moment in our history that has to be turned around. Not Democrat, Republican, has to be turned around. As a consequence, we should do what is required by the obligations of this democracy, by our faith in God and our faith in each other, to do justice, to love mercy, to walk humbly, and as fellow human beings and fellow Americans, remember, we're unique in all of history as a nation. This is the United States of America, for God's sake. And God bless you all, particularly those who push this through and continue to push it. Now I'm going to sign this bill, which is a great honor. I don't know who's calling, but tell them we're busy. I was going to say, unless it was my sister, but she's here. So I'd like to invite to the stage Senator Hirano, Senator Duckworth, Congresswoman Grace Meng, Congresswoman Judy Chu, Congressman Don Beyer, Senator Richard Blumenthal, and Senator Moran, but I don't think he could be here today. Actually, I should put the table down the middle of all of you and sign it down there. But thank you, thank you, thank you. If I can get my name, will you sign it for me? All right.
You don't do this as president.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. And welcome back, everyone. Next, we have a media update in British Columbia. John Horgan is actually stepping in to help give this update on COVID-19 and the COVID-19 response in British Columbia, including the circuit breaker, which is set to end at midnight, May 25th. There are going to be several questions asked about why May 25th. Why isn't it being turned off sooner? Why aren't they making announcements about what is actually going to happen in British Columbia after the circuit breaker is turned off? And the simple answer is that he wants to make sure that the public will continue to obey the orders until after the long weekend is actually over. That is the reason for setting it for May 25th and making there will be another announcement May 26th. It will discuss the plan about how British Columbia plans to reopen and continued vaccination programs. So let's listen to what John Horgan, Adrian Dix, and Dr. Bonnie Henry actually have to say about what is going to happen over this Victoria Day long weekend.
All good? Great, thank you. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Premier John Horgan here on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nation. I'm joined here today for the regular briefing of Dr. Henry and Minister Dix to update on the state of COVID cases and a history of how we got here and what the vaccine program has been able to do for us to this point in time. I'm also very excited to advise today we have lowered the age for vaccinations to 12, so 12 to 17-year-olds are now available to register, to get a booking, and get a vaccination. That's good news for families who will want to do this together as we increase our immunity in households and communities right across the province. This is an exciting time for us as we see case counts coming down, the burden on our hospitals lessening somewhat, and some light at the end of the tunnel. But I'm here today on a normal day for Dr. Henry and Minister Dix to talk directly to you to reinforce that there are public health orders in place. There are travel restrictions in place, not to the beginning of the long weekend, but to the end of the long weekend. As a province, we've come a great distance over the past 15 months. Families, businesses, communities, individuals have struggled through this pandemic, and we have a little ways to go yet. But we're so close. I urge all British Columbians to recognize that we do have public health orders in place until Monday evening at midnight. Tuesday, next week, Minister Dix, Dr. Henry and I will be back again to talk about our restart plan. We're all excited about a positive summer and a hopeful fall, but we got to get there. We have to get there, and that means adhering to the restrictions that are in place today, tomorrow, and throughout the weekend. I'm confident that British Columbians can make this modest sacrifice for one more long weekend so we can protect our frontline workers who have been there for us for the past 15 months and well before that, keeping us safe when we most need it. They need us right now to follow the orders so that we can have the summer that we all want to see. I'm excited about the vaccination program and the success we've had. Dr. Henry is going to lay out some very important information that will highlight for all of us the importance of registering, getting a booking, and getting a vaccination. British Columbians from age 12 and up are accessible to this system. We have clinics in communities around British Columbia. It's easy, it's simple, and it'll keep you and your family and your community safe. So with that, I'll ask Dr. Henry to take the microphone, and I look forward to the briefing.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. We'll start off with an update on our cases here in British Columbia today. Today we have 357 new cases diagnosed with COVID-19, bringing the total number of people with COVID-19 to 140,953 in British Columbia. 80 of the new cases live in the Vancouver Coastal Health Region, 210 in the Fraser Health Region, 12 are people in the Vancouver Island Health Region, 33 people live in Interior Health, and 22 in the Northern Health Region. We currently have 4,636 active cases across the province, 331 of whom are in hospital, 113 in critical care or ICU, and 134,521 people have recovered from their acute illness. Sadly, we continue to have people who die from COVID-19, and today we have 3 more of our family members, our friends, our colleagues who have passed away from COVID-19. One in Northern Health, a person in their 70s, a person again in a long-term care home in Interior Health in their 90s, and 2 people in Fraser Health in their 60s and 80s. And our condolences go out to the family members, the care providers, and our communities who mourn all of the 1,661 people we have lost this year. We have 1 new outbreak to report, the Chartwell Carlton Care Home in Fraser Health, and outbreaks are now over at the Dawson Creek and Region Hospital and at Orchard Haven Long-Term Care. So this leaves us with 4 active outbreaks in long-term care and assisted living and 1 in acute care. It has reporting of outbreaks in assisted living and long-term care homes has been included in our daily reports from the very beginning of this pandemic, and the information is now summarized, as you know, in public health reports that come out weekly. The information is provided by the leaders in each of our health authority to the BC CDC, and that forms our weekly outbreak report. It has come to my attention in the past week that there are several outbreaks in assisted living that were responded to over the past number of months and were managed and aggressively, as we do for all outbreaks, but have not been reported or posted in our outbreak reports. Two are in the Vancouver Coastal Health Region, one at the Terraces on 7th and one at the Chalmers Long-Term Care Home. Full action was taken by local public health and by my public health colleagues to manage with those facilities, but they have not yet been included. And so recently, as we became aware of this, we want to make sure that all of these outbreaks are in our outbreak reports, and they will be added today for transparency. And going forward, we will make sure that we include all of these outbreaks in our reports and the weekly outbreak reports. So the exciting news today that we continue to have growth in our immunization program, and we've delivered 2,687,360 doses of all three of our COVID-19 vaccines in BC. And that's a little over 58% of adults 18 and over in British Columbia, and about 3% or 138,906 have been second doses. I'd like to share a little bit of information about what that means for us. And this is an infographic that shows what we call vaccine effectiveness. And this is aligned with what we shared last Thursday when we talked about breakthrough and the risk of infection going down when people are immunized. What this looks at is those people in our community who are 70 years of age and over, who received a single dose of Pfizer vaccine mostly. How effective does that mean at a community level of preventing transmission of infections? And this is done using a very rigorous process led by Dr. Danuta Skowronski at the BC CDC, where we have done this for many other respiratory pathogens, including influenza. And we're now at the point where we can assess the effect that our immunization program is having in our community here in BC. And what it shows us is that our vaccine program is highly effective. After 3 to 4 weeks, so 21 to 28 days, with a single dose, our risk in our community of transmitting SARS-CoV has been reduced by 70%. This means we prevent over 2 of 3 infections, new infections. This tells us really important things, along with the information we presented last week, that when we have this level of protection at a community level, our rates of transmission go down, our rates of severe illness go down, and that protects our hospital system and protects each one of us. It tells us our vaccines work. But it also reminds us that it takes time for these vaccines to do what they need to do to stimulate our immune system and for that full protection to come. And that means we need to continue to pay attention to our full safety measures for the coming weeks as we bridge to that new future that we have in the summer. As more and more of us are being immunized, this level of protection will spread in our communities. And importantly, today, everyone in BC, as the Premier has said, who is 12 and older, can now register and book your vaccine. Appointments are being booked for about 310,000 youth, aged 12 to 17, and all of them are eligible for the Pfizer vaccine. Currently, it is only the Pfizer vaccine that's licensed for use in children, or has a notice of compliance, as we call it, for youth down to age 12. We are expecting that the Moderna vaccine, they have been doing trials in younger people around with that vaccine, and we're hopeful that it will, very soon, also be approved for use. But currently it's the Pfizer vaccine, and young people will be welcomed into all of the clinics that we have around the province whether it's our large immunization sites in some cases, in some more rural or remote communities, it might be the clinic set up for your whole of community immunization. In some cases, it will be in schools, but we have consulted with public health, with our youth groups and families, and we found that the most effective way for youth to be immunized and for families to go together is to do it through our clinics that we have established around the province. We will, like those 18 plus, we do encourage all youth to register online by phone at our Services BC Centre. And if you don't have a personal health number, then register by phone. You can book an appointment yourself if you're a young person in this category, or you can have a parent, guardian, or trusted adult work with you to do that. If a parent or guardian has an appointment booked already, you can bring the youth 12 to 17 with you to that appointment. And that's one thing that we're going to do at all of our clinics so that families can come together and get vaccinated at the same time. If you plan to do this, it helps if you register, but that's not required. Or you can, but when you do arrive at the clinic, let people know so that we can have a special stream to make sure that we're able to get you through efficiently. We've been working with the Youth Vaccination Advisory Committee from the BC Children's Hospital to make sure that we have youth-friendly clinics available, and we can answer the questions that young people have about these vaccines and about their concerns. But please come together. We'll be having after-school clinics. There'll be clinics through this weekend that people will be eligible for. When you go to your appointments, please bring your ID for everyone getting vaccinated, and that could be a BC Services card, your school identification card, birth certificate, or a bank card, and ideally have your personal health number with you or available. It's an exciting step for all of us, and we know that youth are excited not only because it's important to protect themselves, but because they know that it's important to protect their families and their loved ones. And really, what I hear from youth is to get their lives back so that we can get to that new future where we're able to socialize again and spend time together with those that we love. Just like we have seen countless people celebrating their vaccine with photos to friends and family on social media, we look forward to seeing young adults joining our team of millions of people now in British Columbia who are doing their part. And I know there's a number of young people in my life who are booked already, and I'm looking forward to seeing their pictures soon. We know that many young people have been negatively impacted by COVID-19 and by the pandemic and by the measures that we've had to put in place now. Now you too will have the opportunity to get vaccinated, to get protected, and to protect those around you. I know it has been tough, but there is a light ahead, and it's coming soon. I'd like to remind everybody, though, that our public health and travel restrictions are still in place until end of this long weekend. And the vaccine effectiveness, the information we've presented on how we are managing and the pandemic and the situation we're in right now reinforces we need to stay the course. Now is not the time to let up, as we're doing so well and getting so far ahead. This means we all need to stay local, stay small, and continue to use all of our layers of protection. I want to ensure all of the positive momentum that we have gained in these last weeks through the sacrifices, small and great, that all of us have made are going to get us safely to this next part of our pandemic journey. Getting vaccinated is how we'll be able to put the COVID-19 pandemic behind us and make sure that even though this virus is going to be with us for some time, we can manage that without putting the strain on our families and our communities that we have now. We're making incredible progress by registering, booking, getting immunized, staying small, and staying local. We are all one step closer to the end of this pandemic. I wish everybody a happy and safe long weekend, and remind you that no matter where you may be or what you may be doing, now is our time to continue to be kind, to be calm, and to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back. With India and Pakistan being a continued hotspot for COVID-19, the federal government has decided to extend the travel ban from India until June 21st, 2021. There will be continued effort to try to help India contain the number of cases and for them to have efforts for healthcare and things and supplies that they need to deal with hospitalizations and other things that are happening because of their continued pandemic. So let's listen to the update from the federal government.
Thank you for joining us. Minister LeBlanc, over to you.
So, thank you very much, Ali. Bonjour à tous. Good afternoon. It's afternoon in New Brunswick. Good morning to those who are in an earlier time zone. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Minister Omar Alghabra, and Dr. Howard New. I want to thank Canadians who've made their appointment to get their vaccine. Canada remains in the top 3 of G20 nations for overall numbers of vaccines administered. Environ 58% des adultes ont reçu au moins une dose et ce chiffre continue et continuera d'augmenter. Nous sommes en train de distribuer un total cumulé de plus de 25 millions de doses aux provinces et territoires d'ici cette fin de semaine et des milliers et des millions d'autres sont en route. Canada remains on track to receive vaccines for all eligible Canadians to receive their first dose by the end of June and for all eligible Canadians to be fully vaccinated by the end of September. So as always, we encourage all of you to get your vaccine when it's your turn. As we head into the long weekend, it is now as important as ever to continue to follow the local health authority guidance. By doing so, we will ensure that there is not an uptick in the number of cases, and we will also be able to beat COVID-19 together. So I now turn to my colleague, Omar Alghabra, and then Dr. New. Omar.
Merci, Dominic. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Bonjour à tous. Our battle against COVID-19 continues. On April 22nd, Transport Canada issued a notice to ban all direct commercial and private passenger flights from India and Pakistan for 30 days based on public health advice to reduce the importation risk of COVID-19 and its variants. We are now extending this measure through June 21st. Les vols directs de l'Inde et du Pakistan sont interdits jusqu'en juin. So, direct commercial and private passenger flights from India and Pakistan will continue to be denied permission to arrive in Canada. We're also extending the third country pre-departure testing requirements for these countries. This means that passengers who depart from India or Pakistan bound for Canada via an indirect route must obtain a valid COVID-19 test results from a third country, not India or Pakistan, before boarding a flight to Canada. These ongoing measures will remain in place to help protect Canadians and to manage the elevated risk of imported cases of COVID-19 and variants of concern into Canada. And I can say that we have seen a significant reduction in the number of positive cases of COVID-19 arriving from international flights since this restriction was put in place. There's still increased pressure on our healthcare system due to the pandemic, so we must continue to be vigilant. Canada currently has some of the strongest border restrictions in the world, with a strict 14-day quarantine, government-approved accommodation measures, and a ban on foreign nationals except in narrow circumstances. These measures also remain in place. They are based on a range of data and advice from public health experts. Our government's measures have resulted in a 96% reduction in air traffic and 82% reduction in land traffic into Canada. This has significantly reduced the importation of COVID-19 into the country. We're also constantly adapting our border measures in response to new evidence and will continue to do so in the situation as the situation evolves. Our government's top priority is protecting Canadians' health and safety. And our response to the global COVID-19 pandemic has always been guided by the latest science and research, and it will continue to be. As vaccines roll out across the country, public health measures remain the foundation of our pandemic response. Vaccination is one of the most effective ways to protect against COVID-19. When it is your turn to get vaccinated, please do so. We must get our vaccine rates as high as possible. And this way, we can end the fight against COVID-19. Ensemble, nous allons terminer le combat contre la COVID-19. Merci. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome back and thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. We have a World Economics briefing, and this briefing is about COVID-19 and Africa, vaccines, and the manufacturing of vaccines. As you know, there's been a lot of push to curb the intellectual property and the royalties benefiting the intellectual property for the vaccines for COVID-19. That here in Canada, there's a group of MPs that are fighting at the federal level to ensure that the pharmaceutical companies do not benefit too far from the intellectual property of the vaccines. That eventually, somehow, they'll eventually make their money from it, but that the formulations, the processes, and the raw materials behind the vaccines in order to end the pandemic should be shared freely and allow manufacturing of these vaccines in other areas that may not necessarily be controlled by the original pharmaceutical company. While all that is happening, there is a valuable realization for parts of Africa where even if the intellectual property was dropped, that they may not have the ability to manufacture the vaccines either way. So what is going to be done about this? How can this be helped? And how can these parts of Africa be supported? That is what is going to be part of what is being discussed in this next segment with the World Economic Briefing on Africa, with the of course members of the WHO being present. So let's listen to what they have to say.
From the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, my name is Adrian Monk. This is the WHO media briefing for Africa. And I'm delighted to say that we are joined from Brazzaville by Dr. Matshidiso Moeti, who is the Regional Director of the WHO. Also joined here by Dina Ringold from the World Bank. She's Regional Director Human Development for Western and Central Africa. And from Standard Chartered, we have Razia Khan, who's Head of Research and Chief Economist for Africa and the Middle East. Standing by as well to take questions, we have Dr. Richard Mahigo, who's WHO Regional Office for Africa Coordinator on Immunization and Vaccine Development. We want your questions. We have taken questions already from folks across Africa's media. Thank you so much for joining us. But first, turning to Dr. Moeti, really on an idea of the very grave situation that the continent is facing in respect of the pandemic. Dr. Moeti.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I'd like to join you in warmly welcoming Ms. Dina Ringold and Ms. Razia Khan to this press conference. And I very much look forward to hearing their perspectives on the economic costs of the COVID-19 pandemic and on financing the vaccine rollout. Dina, thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning where you are. And Razia, it's wonderful to meet you, my compatriot, in this press conference. There have now been 4.7 million COVID-19 cases and 127,000 lives sadly lost on the African continent. So far, 24 million Africans have received at least one dose of COVID-19 vaccine and 5.5 million have received 2 doses. So when we look at access to the vaccines, we see great inequalities across countries. Seychelles is one of the most vaccinated countries in the world, with 67% of the population having received at least one dose. In Morocco, they've reached 29%, and in Mauritius, 17%. Whereas in 14 African countries, less than 1% of the population has received a single dose, and in 4 countries, vaccination hasn't started at all. COVID-19 vaccine shipments to African countries have slowed down to a trickle this month because of the reliance on India as one of the key manufacturers globally and the devastating surge of cases that that country is dealing with. The continent was expecting 66 million doses through COVAX from February to May, but instead has so far received only 18.2 million. While in Africa, on average, fewer than 2 in 100, that's 2%, people have received a dose of COVID-19 vaccine. In some high-income countries, more than 8 out of 10 people, that's 80%, have been reached. Such a huge difference. This means that as people living in richer countries can hit the reset button this summer and their lives will return to a semblance of normal, in Africa, our lives will continue to be on hold. We can still catch up and make up for the lost ground, but time is running out. While African countries await shipments of COVID-19 vaccines, many are struggling to roll out even their limited doses, and second doses to complete the course of vaccination are at risk. Funding for operational costs is also a critical barrier. It's estimated that 60% of every dollar spent on delivering vaccines is needed for logistics and operations. Urgent action, therefore, is needed to finance Africa's COVID-19 vaccine rollout. The World Bank estimates, and I'm sure we'll be hearing from Dina, that in addition to the $9.5 billion needed to buy enough vaccines to ensure adequate protection from the virus, another $3 billion is required to fund vaccinators, cold room storage, logistics, equipment, and transport to deliver them. COVAX, the World Bank, and other partners are supporting co-financing of these additional costs, but countries need to develop robust financial plans and cost estimates to access these funds. As WHO, we're working with governments to improve planning and costing for the operational and delivery processes to support COVID-19 vaccine rollout and providing support to access funding opportunities. We are also collaborating closely with the African Union, the Africa CDC, on their efforts with the Afrexim Bank. International solidarity is crucial in supporting the vaccine rollout. Excuse me. We welcome the pledge by the United States this week to share 80 million doses with other countries, with a substantial proportion expected to go through the COVAX, in addition to recent shipments of vaccines from France to Mauritania and pledges by several other high-income countries. There is great interest and push for manufacturing on the African continent, and this is a promising medium to long-term solution. To save lives and prevent severe illness now and speed up the recovery from the pandemic, it's in the interest of all countries to rapidly increase coverage of the vaccines globally. African countries also need to see what domestic resources are available to support the social and economic priority. So it's critical to use this time while there are only limited resources to cost and plan for a more effective rollout and ensure that all doses are used as effectively as possible. So I look forward to a very good discussion of these matters with you. And again, welcome and thank you for having joined us.
Thank you very much, Dr. Moeti. Can I turn to Dina Ringgold in Washington, D.C. at the World Bank? Dina, can you tell us what the World Bank is doing to help finance the vaccines that Africa needs and how that money gets into the pockets of those who need it to make things happen?
Sure. Thank you, Adrian. Good morning, good day to everyone. And really thank you to Dr. Moeti and WHO colleagues for the invitation to be here, and nice to meet you today, Razia. So I'm pleased to join you to talk about the World Bank's response to the COVID-19 pandemic in sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly the role that we're playing currently in the vaccine rollout. We know that this COVID-19 pandemic continues to exert pressure on African economies and exacerbate poverty, and tens of millions of people are falling into poverty. In addition to the loss of lives and human capital, we estimate that every month of delay in the provision of COVID-19 vaccines has the potential to cost the African continent close to $14 billion in lost GDP. So this is an economic and a social crisis. Overall, our response to the pandemic has been the largest and fastest response that we've mounted to a crisis in the history of the institution. If I roll back to March of last year, our initial global package for health response involved preparing 100 projects in 100 days to help countries fight the pandemic through building capacity for testing, surveillance, and treatment. And in Africa, this involved about $1 billion for 39 countries on the continent. And this was alongside our broader effort that was focused on saving lives, but also saving livelihoods through social protection, ensuring sustainable business growth, and working to build a more resilient recovery. And we've been also doing this in partnership with regional institutions such as WAHO and the Africa CDC, which have been playing a critical role during the pandemic. Moving to vaccines, last fall, our board of directors approved a $12 billion package to help countries purchase and deploy COVID-19 vaccines. At the same time, we worked closely with our partners, WHO, UNICEF, and Gavi, to support countries in preparing vaccine readiness assessments and national vaccine plans to guide deployment. As of today, we have received requests from 36 countries in Africa for vaccine financing amounting to close to $2 billion. And this includes 7 projects for 7 countries that have already been approved by our board, and an additional 29 that are at varying stages of preparation. We are working to help countries acquire vaccines through COVAX and also directly with manufacturers. And as Dr. Moeti said, the challenge goes beyond purchasing vaccines. We're working with countries to support deployment. The readiness assessments identified and underscored key gaps, including in cold chain equipment, energy infrastructure, logistics, transport, community engagement, and essentially, in many cases, most critically, the human resources needed to deploy the vaccine. I want to underscore that our work during the pandemic builds on the longstanding engagement that the World Bank has in the health sector in Africa. And we've seen that the COVID-19 crisis has strained already weak health systems and reinforced the urgency of ongoing efforts to strengthen health systems, move towards universal health coverage and service delivery. So So in conclusion, I want to emphasize that fair, broad, and fast access to safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines, alongside ongoing work on testing, treatment, and building strong health systems, are the critical ingredients for protecting lives and stimulating economic recovery on the continent. Only once the pandemic is contained in all countries will each country be safe from a resurgence. So the World Bank is committed to working with countries and our partners to increase the supply of vaccines to Africa. Thank you.
Dina, thank you for that. You touched there upon the economic impact the crisis is having across Africa. Perhaps we can explore that in a little bit more depth with Razia Khan from Standard Chartered. Razia, can you give us more insight into how hard the pandemic is hitting African economies?
Thank you, Adrian. We know that unlike last year when we saw a synchronized slowdown across most economies across the world, 2021 is at least looking different. And even in sub-Saharan Africa, in key economies recently, growth has surprised positively. But there are still great issues stemming from the multi-speed nature of this recovery and the fact that we have seen this very uneven access to vaccines. A technical bounce back in growth in year-on-year terms after a very dramatic slowdown last year, the fact that countries are now growing, is a little bit less meaningful. What needs to happen is a much more comprehensive, sustained growth experience for African countries to really overcome the impact of the crisis. We know that the COVID crisis came at a real human cost. Unlike a lot of other more developed economies, there's very little fiscal room to introduce more stimulatory policies in Africa. For many sub-Saharan African countries, especially, there just wouldn't have been the room for significant monetary easing, although central banks were able to add support where possible. The basic problem is this: it's going to take a while for economic momentum to be fully restored. Despite the good news of rising commodity prices, despite more positivity and optimism around prospects, we know that there is a meaningful difference stemming significantly from the uneven access to vaccines in terms of how quickly and how comfortably African economies will be able to put this economic crisis behind them. The good news is that new COVID containment measures are not necessarily associated with the same decline in economic activity that we saw for much of 2020. The bad news, though, is that the very uneven pace of the global economic recovery does raise risks for African economies. Even as we see investor sentiment improving, we see spread tightening in terms of Africa's external debt, suggesting that markets are now looking at a recovery scenario. We're not yet seeing significant new capital inflows into the region. And this is a big concern, because as you might see other advanced economies recovering faster, having to change monetary policy settings even sooner, that could have a very detrimental impact on sub-Saharan Africa's countries that have not seen the restoration of significant capital inflows yet. There has been a multilateral response, some of the debt service relief that was granted, extending the debt service standstill initiative. We know that for some countries, deeper debt treatment might be needed. Everyone is now looking to the support from an IMF SDR allocation, but we all know that even the multilateral response that we've seen so far isn't nearly sufficient to meet Africa's external financing requirements. Lastly, I would say that as we look to build back from the COVID crisis, we know that sub-Saharan African economies have a lot to offer. Given their demographics, faster growth in Africa could easily lift prospects in a much more meaningful way on a global level. But for an entire region of the world to be denied this contribution to global growth, partly because of the very inequitable access to vaccines, raises questions that do need to be addressed on a global level. The good news is the worst of the crisis, the economic crisis, seems to be behind us. The not so good news is that there are still significant challenges ahead.
Thank you for listening to Policy and Rights Today. A lot of things have happened over the past week. there's been a lot of devastation, of course, in along the Gaza Strip, and due to fighting between Israel and Hamas. And while they have come to a ceasefire, but the damage is done. There are people needing medical attention because of the bombings and the rockets. There are a need for food supply chains to be rebuilt. Medical supplies the supply chains need to be rebuilt. A lot of things have happened. Meanwhile, while in India, they are struggling just to maintain. They're trying to curb their pandemic so that the hospitals are not overwhelmed, and trying to manufacture vaccines and get things back on track. In Canada and other parts of the world, they have banned travel to and from Pakistan because of the level of cases that are being reported. So one area could have totally been avoided by just simply the two sides sitting down and talking, which Israel and Hamas are going to have to sit down and talk anyway. The fighting is over. The ceasefire has come. Now they have the need to talk. We need to remember this, that when conflict comes, the need to talk should be put first, because if we sit, we talk, we negotiate, we can avoid war and loss of life. In India, the devastation due to the number of cases, not so avoidable. It is a pandemic, and case counts are going to happen. But we need to be able to work together as a global community and put together the medicines and the care needed for people who are in trouble. The same goes for Latin American countries such as Brazil and Chile, who need our help right now so that they can get around their pandemic, get through it, and save lives. So please do go to depictions.media for more information. You can find more information from, of course, the WHO, the UN, the government of British Columbia, because, hey, we reside in British Columbia, and from the U.S. and Canadian federal governments. Just click on the links at the end of every article and listen to more of our podcasts and shows that we hope will help and inspire. While you're there, please do click on our contact link and tell us how we can help. This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.